They went out to explore the stars and tripped an ancient alarm. Humanity wasn't attacked. It was judged. With 7 days to prove its worth, one ship, damaged, haunted, and watched, became the voice of an entire species. They weren't asked to fight. They were asked to change. And the stars? They never forget. Stay with us to find out how this trial ends, and don't forget to subscribe. The kestrel dawn groaned under the weight of its own silence. Emergency lights flickered like failing stars, and the recycled air tasted like old metal and fear. Nothing moved that wasn't bolted down, and even the bolts felt like they were holding their breath. Captain Ryden Holt stood at the center of the command deck, fist clenched against the edge of the primary console. Around him, the bridge crew stared silently at him, at the failing systems, at the stars that no longer blinked back. None of them dared speak what they were all thinking. They were out of time, and no one was coming. "We've sent out the distress signal," muttered Brooks, the comms officer. His voice cracked like a wire snapping under strain. "If anyone's out there." Ryden didn't reply. His gaze was fixed on the shattered forward display, where the anomaly had erased not only their navigation systems but most of their hope. The black beyond didn't feel like space anymore. It felt like a verdict. The anomaly hadn't attacked. That was what made it worse. It hadn't declared war or made demands. It had just been. One moment the systems were fine. The next, cascading failures across every critical function. Life support crippled. Communications dead. Artificial gravity failing in short, terrifying pulses. The crew had scrambled, sealing sections of the ship, jury-rigging systems, doing what humans always did when cornered survive. Now they had maybe 30 hours of breathable air left, less if the CO2 scrubbers gave out completely. Half the ship had been depressurized, and they'd lost over 20 crew in the decompression surge. Ryden had ordered the forward compartments sealed to prevent further loss, but he could still hear the screams, echoes burned into his brain, memories that would never fade. The Kestrel Dawn hadn't been built for war. She was a deep-range survey vessel. Exploration, not engagement. They weren't soldiers. They were scientists, technicians, engineers. And yet they'd wandered into something ancient, something vast. Ryden turned to say something to Brooks when the comms officer froze, eyes wide. "Sir," Brooks whispered, standing slowly, "I don't think we're alone." Before Ryden could react, he felt it too, a pressure in the air that didn't belong. He turned, and there, standing silently in the middle of the bridge, was a figure. A man. Or something close. He hadn't come through a door. No shimmering teleport effect. No distortion. One moment, the deck was empty. The next, he was just there. He was tall, with pale skin that shimmered faintly, like frost under starlight. His robes absorbed light rather than reflecting it. His eyes were black, utterly black, depthless and consuming, like the gravity well of a collapsed star. Ryden reached for his sidearm out of instinct. The figure raised one hand, not threatening, just still. "That won't help," he said calmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room, like it was coming from every speaker, every console, every wire in the ship. The crew froze, their movements suspended by something deeper than fear. "Who are you?" Ryden demanded. "I am what answers when humanity calls for help," the figure said. "Only this time, help is not what you deserve." Brooks swallowed hard. What does that mean?" Ryden didn't look away. "If you didn't come to help us, then what are you?" "Judgment." The word rang through the air like the final chime of a broken clock. "We didn't cause this," Ryden said, steadying himself. "We don't even know what we hit out there." The figure stepped forward slowly, his robes whispering like dead leaves. "What you hit," he said, "was a warning. This part of space was sealed, not with weapons, not with walls, but with silence. And you, like always, couldn't resist poking what you didn't understand. We're explorers," Ryden said. "Not invaders." "You say that every time," the figure replied coldly. "You colonize. You dig. You extract. You spread. That is your nature. That is your sin." "We're trying to learn," Ryden argued. "We've made mistakes, yes, but we're building alliances. We've signed treaties." "You sign with one hand while taking with the other." Suddenly, the lights came back on. Consoles flickered to life. Systems rebooted one by one, the hum of restored power rising like a breath held too long finally released. The crew gasped. Brooks stared at the readings. "Everything's coming back online." Ryden didn't take his eyes off the figure. "You brought us back." "Why?" "To give you time," the figure replied. "This is a warning. The last you'll ever get." "And if we don't change?" Ryden asked. The figure smiled faintly, not with kindness, but with inevitability. "Then next time the stars hear your distress call, they won't send someone like me. They'll send something final." The lights flickered. The figure vanished. No breach. No flash. No transition. Just gone. The bridge remained in stunned silence. Then Ryden turned to Brooks. "Get Earth Command on the line. Priority 1. Brooks hesitated. "Sir, they're going to think we're crazy." Ryden exhaled. "Yeah, but they need to hear this. Because crazy or not, He's not wrong. The hum of the ship's systems returning to life should have been comforting. But it wasn't. Not for Raiden. Not for any of them. The ship lived again, but the resurrection felt wrong. Power flowed through its veins, systems flickered to life, and artificial gravity stabilized. Life support readings blinked green across the board. It was too easy. Too smooth. As if whatever had shut them down hadn't done so out of aggression, but out of pure demonstration. Like flicking off a light switch to prove the darkness is always there. Brooks hunched over the comm station, typing rapidly. We're back in network range, but there's interference. Something's riding our transmissions. Raiden stood behind him, arms crossed, the hard edge of command steel back in his voice. Use the emergency override channels. I don't care if you have to route through Mars orbit via pigeon. Just get Earth. The rest of the bridge crew moved in tense silence. Nobody cracked a joke. Nobody muttered. They had all seen it. The figure who arrived from nowhere, whose voice poured from the ship's walls, whose warning wasn't shouted but delivered. A being that spoke not like an enemy, but like a verdict. Raiden Holt had seen a lot in his career. War. Piracy. The slow, grinding terror of hull breach while drifting through dead space. But this wasn't any of that. This was bigger. And it scared him. Got it, Brooks said suddenly. Patch established. Earth Command is on the line. Routed to my station. The display lit up with static, then resolved into the stern face of Admiral Kyra Delane. Her gray hair was bound tight against her skull, her uniform crisp. But her eyes, they cut through the screen like razors. Captain Holt, she snapped. You've been off-grid for 5 days. What happened? Raiden didn't hesitate. We encountered an anomaly. Lost multiple crew. System-wide shutdown. Sent a distress call. We received it, Delane said, her tone colder than vacuum. The data was fragmented. Glitchy. No coordinates. We've had recon vessels sweeping 3 sectors. You won't find anything, Raiden said. The signal didn't go to you first. Delane's expression sharpened. Explain. So he did. He told her everything. The power collapse. The deaths. The figure. The message. He expected her to scoff. To accuse him of hallucinations. But when he finished, she didn't speak for several seconds. When she did, her voice was tight. We've had similar reports. Raiden's breath caught. What? 2 ships. Deep-range explorers. Both experienced full system shutdowns. One never came back. The other reported contact with an entity description nearly identical to yours. Then, silence. You're saying we're not the first? We're not even the 5th, she said flatly. But you're the first to re-establish contact. Why wasn't this shared with the fleet? We didn't believe them. And now, we might have to. Brooks spoke up from the side. Ma'am, with all due respect, what do we do? Delane stared directly at Raiden. You said it gave us a warning. A chance. Figure out what triggered this. What did we do to earn its attention? The screen blinked out. Raiden turned to the crew, his voice low. Review every log. Navigation. Atmospheric readings. Energy usage. Something tripped that thing's sensors. Find out what. They worked like the damned. For hours, the crew dug through every line of data. Desperate. Driven. And then Science Officer Jin called out. Captain, you need to see this. Raiden leaned over her shoulder, scanning the readout. This anomaly, it's not just radiation or gravitational distortion. It left a signature. Quantum-level residue, designed to identify energy patterns. Left behind by what? She looked up, her face pale. A beacon. Raiden straightened. We tripped an interstellar tripwire. Jin nodded grimly. It wasn't just a random pulse. It was watching for us. Specifically for human energy outputs, terraforming emissions, reactor harmonics, pulse drive signatures. It cataloged our systems the moment we got near it. Brooks entered, holding a fresh data pad. Captain, I tracked the beacon's pulse after it scanned us. It didn't stop at our position. It continued outward. Fast. Where did it go? Unknown. But it's beyond human space. Beyond anything we've charted. Raiden stared at the projection. His voice was quiet. So someone else out there knows we exist now. And they didn't before. This wasn't a warning, Jen added. It was a decision point. They're watching. It was never about this ship, Raiden muttered. It's about all of us. A test. And he had the sinking feeling Earth wasn't going to like the results. He moved through the corridors, passing crew members who met his eyes with uncertainty. He made his way to the medbay. Half the beds were occupied, burn victims, concussed techs, crews still recovering from the decompression incident. In the corner, Second Engineer Callis lay under light sedation, a bypass ventilator hissing softly beside her. Raiden pulled up a chair. You shouldn't talk, he said. She smiled faintly, eyes half-lidded. Too late. I've been listening. To what? To the crew, she whispered. They're not afraid of dying. They're afraid of being seen. He frowned. Callis coughed softly, then added, I used to think we were the good guys, bringing civilization to the stars. But maybe we're just dragging our shadows with us. Raiden had no answer. Before he could speak, the intercom crackled. Captain Holt to the bridge. Priority signal detected. Non-human origin. He stood. Stay with her, he told the medtech, then ran. When he reached the bridge, the forward display was lit with symbols alien. Elegant. Purposeful. What is that? Ryden asked. Brooks shook his head. It started broadcasting a few seconds ago. We're running it through the xenolinguistics filter. The computer beeped. Message translated. Observation complete. Evaluation under review. Ryden's mouth went dry. Jin's voice cracked. If there's an evaluation, that means there's going to be a verdict. The message disappeared. A new one appeared in its place. Judgment will be delivered in 7 rotations. Jin gasped. That's 7 Earth days. Ryden stared at the screen. No, he said slowly. That's 7 chances. The bridge went quiet. Ryden looked at them all, his crew, his responsibility, his people. They're watching. Everything we do. Every word. Every decision. We just became humanity's trial by fire. He exhaled. His voice dropped to a whisper. In 7 days, we find out if we live or if we burn. 7 days. It sounded like time enough, until you realized every second ticking by wasn't just a countdown but a piece of evidence. A fragment of proof or guilt. The Kestrel Dawn was no longer a ship. It was an exhibit in a cosmic courtroom, and every breath its crew took echoed in an unseen chamber where a verdict was being shaped. Captain Ryden Holt felt the weight of that truth like gravity on his shoulders. They worked because they had to. Hull fractures were sealed, energy conduits realigned. Stabilizers reset. The crew moved with mechanical precision, but under the surface was a pressure, a tension so thick it was visible in their eyes, in the twitch of fingers over console keys, in the way no one laughed anymore. Jin confirmed what they all suspected. There's a low-band radiation signature tracking our power core, she said, pulling up the data overlay. It's broadcasting short bursts. Alien encryption. We can't break it, but we don't need to. It's transmitting us. Brooks leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, jaw tight. So we're not just on trial. We're being streamed. No, Ryden said, voice firm. We're being remembered. Whatever comes next, they want a record of why it happens. At first, they tried to go about their duties like nothing had changed. But it was impossible. Every conversation became cautious. Every decision carried a question. Are we being judged for this? When 2 junior engineers got into a shoving match over ration prioritization, Ryden didn't punish them. Instead, he brought them both to the mess hall, sat them down, and let silence gnaw at them. They cracked on their own, apologies spilling out like oxygen from a ruptured tank. Real apologies. Not forced, not rehearsed. Honest. And it felt important. Afterward, Brooks cornered him. You think they're watching for empathy? Ryden nodded. I think they're watching for anything that proves we're worth keeping. By the 3rd day, the silence broke, but not from within. A new transmission came through. Human. A mining vessel near the Delta Drift had picked up the same message. The words were different, but the meaning was identical. You were being evaluated. The message had spread. Other captains began sending whispers through encrypted back channels. Some tried to suppress panic. Others fled. A few, those brave or foolish enough, broadcast appeals, begging unseen watchers for mercy. Ryden shook his head. We can't run from this. No, Brooks said quietly. But they might still ruin it for the rest of us. Because the evaluation wasn't individual. It was collective. If one ship fired on an alien outpost, if one colony strip-mined a sacred ecosystem, if one AI slaughtered a rebellion for efficiency, the entire species would carry the stain. That night, Ryden stood alone in the observatory. The stars beyond the tinted glass glimmered like they always had. Cold. Indifferent. And yet, different. Jin joined him silently. Do you think we're worth saving? She asked. He didn't answer right away. He thought of Earth, of ancient forests and concrete jungles, of kindness shared between strangers and cruelty institutionalized by systems. He thought of Mars, where he was born, how power there belonged to the ruthless, and hope grew in narrow cracks between brutalist towers. He thought of the war, of the refugee who had kissed his hand after he'd given away his last ration. Sometimes, he finally said, I think we are. Jin nodded. I think, whoever they are, they want to believe that too. Ryden turned to her. And for the first time since this all began, something like resolve flickered behind his tired eyes. Then we'd better give them a damn reason. By the 5th day, the Kestrel Dawn no longer felt like a ship. It was a crucible. Every system adjustment, every calm word in a heated moment, every show of patience or kindness, each act was a stroke on a canvas humanity didn't know it was painting. Ryden Holt had become more than a captain. He was the face of an entire species, standing on trial without ceremony or defense counsel. And the universe was watching. Reports came in from across human space. Not official ones, those were still being suppressed by Earth Command, but whispers through pirate relays, smuggler dens, and fringe colonies. Same pattern. Same message. Observation. Evaluation. Judgment. Some ships never responded again. Others changed. A freighter in the Sarek Belt halted operations. Its captain refused to mine another asteroid until they had full ecological clearance from a third-party regulator. A warship in the Valari cluster lowered its weapons permanently and transmitted peace offerings to nearby alien colonies. On a prison transport, a warden released half the inmates, non-violent offenders, granting them freedom in one sentence. This is your second chance. Brooks sat in the dim light of the briefing room, rubbing his temples. We're rewriting our species just to stay alive. No, Ryden said. We're remembering what we should have been all along. The change wasn't fake. It wasn't performative. It hurt, but it felt right. And then, on the sixth day, everything changed again. Captain, Jen called out. You need to see this. Ryden moved quickly. The forward display glowed, not with a message, but with coordinates. New anomaly? He asked. Jen nodded. Stable. Artificial. It's not broadcasting a warning. It's inviting us. Ryden didn't hesitate. Plot a course. We go now. Brooks stepped forward. Sir, what if it's a trap? If it is, Ryden said, then maybe that's the judgment. But if they're giving us a chance to speak, then we take it. The crew moved with urgency, but not fear. For the first time in days, they had purpose. It took just under 9 hours at maximum burn. When they arrived, what they found wasn't a ship or a station. It was a monument, a construct the size of a small moon. Spherical, metallic, wrapped in concentric rings that pulsed with soft blue light. Not threatening, not welcoming, just watching. Ryden stood at the observation window, staring. What the hell is that? He whispered. Jin's voice was hushed. A judgment chamber? As if summoned by the words, the ship's system shifted. A voice, calm, flat, impossibly vast, filled the air. Captain Ryden Holt, it said. You have chosen to stand. The crew froze. Your vessel has been designated as the representative of your species. You may speak. You may offer proof. You may offer nothing. But you must choose. Ryden stepped forward. Who are you? He asked. Silence. Then, we are the measure. You are the consequence. Brooks whispered, Captain, what the hell do we even say? Ryden stared into the impossible construct. Then back at his crew. I speak for humanity, he said. Not as a leader. Not as a soldier. Just as someone who knows what it means to fall and to get back up again. The voice replied instantly. Then prepare your testimony. You have one rotation. One Earth day, Jin whispered. Ryden nodded, his eyes steady. One day, he said. To speak for us all. The kestrel dawn fell into his silence unlike any before. Not the hush of dread, or the weight of failure, but the profound stillness of a moment that mattered. They had one rotation, one Earth day, to plead for their species' existence. There would be no trial, no cross-examination, no jury. Only a single message, delivered into the dark. A testimony for the stars. Captain Ryden Holt sat alone in the observation deck. The stars outside the reinforced glass shimmered with cold detachment, and beyond them, somewhere within that unknowable monument, something listened, or watched, or waited. He held a device in his hands, small, old, analog. An antique digital recorder from early deep space missions. It felt more honest than the sterile interfaces of the ship's AI. This wasn't a tactical transmission or prepared speech. It wasn't diplomacy. It was memory. It was confession. He clicked it on. My name is Ryden Holt, he said softly. I was born on Mars. I've never set foot on Earth, but I've studied it. The rivers, the cities, the ruins and rebirths, the contradictions. He paused, thinking. I don't know what you want to hear. I won't pretend we've been good stewards of the stars. We haven't. We've taken more than we've given. We've colonized, extracted, assumed. We've hurt. We've killed. Sometimes by accident. Often not. He stared into the stars. But that's not all we are. I've seen a man give his last rations to a starving child from a species he couldn't name. I've seen engineers rebuild a habitat from scraps just to save 10 lives they'd never met. I've seen a colony refuse to defend itself, not out of cowardice, but out of belief that retaliation would only worsen the wound. His voice cracked. We build weapons, but we also build homes. We make war, but we mourn our dead. We're slow to learn, but we do learn. Sometimes we don't change until it hurts. But when it hurts, when we're truly cornered, someone always stands up. Always says, we can do better. He stopped. Let the silence hang. Then he said, you want judgment. Here's our truth. We don't deserve mercy because we're good. We deserve it because we keep trying. Because even now, especially now, we're still trying. He clicked the recorder off and sat there, alone. The next morning, he stood before his crew in the briefing hall. They looked at him with exhaustion, but also trust. Silent trust. Shared weight. I've recorded our testimony, he told them. It's not a list of achievements. It's not an apology. It's just truth. I sent it moments ago. What if it's not enough? Brooks asked. Ryden met his eyes. Then at least we didn't lie. The chronometer reached its final hour. Raiden returned to the command deck and watched as the transmission vanished into the dark. The moment it reached the alien construct, the ship dimmed, but not in fear. This time, it was like the monument was reaching out and gently placing its hand on the hull, holding them, studying them. No alarms, no threats, just stillness. Then the voice returned, not spoken, not heard, but known. Your kind is flawed, violent, driven by hunger for more. A pause followed. But your capacity for change, your resistance to finality, has been noted. No one breathed. Then came the final words. Judgment is postponed. Raiden dropped to his knees without realizing. Jen helped him back up, her voice barely a whisper. Postponed. Not forgiven, Raiden said. Not yet. Brooke stepped closer, confused. Then what does it mean? Raiden stared at the fading glow of the monument. It means they gave us another chance. And then the monument was gone. No jump, no light burst, no distortion. It simply stopped being there. The Kestrel Dawn hummed with power. Systems returned to full strength. The engines cycled up. But nothing felt the same, because everything had changed. In the days that followed, no orders came from Earth Command. No congratulations. No protocol. Only silence. And silence, now, was heavy. It wasn't peace. It was aftermath. Raiden wandered the decks. Not to oversee repairs, there weren't many, but to be present. The crew needed something more than command now. They needed a symbol, and he had become that, whether he wanted it or not. Jen found him in the engineering sector, standing among reassembled coolant pipes. They're calling you a hero, she said quietly. Raiden scoffed. I gave a speech. You stood, she replied. You gave them something to believe in. I gave them a pause, Raiden said. That's all. We're still standing on a knife's edge. She didn't argue, because they both knew it was true. The next message from Earth confirmed it. Other monuments, different forms, but same purpose, had appeared near human colonies and major expansion corridors. Ships had vanished after the final deadline. Some returned, changed. Humanity was being observed now. Not attacked, not hunted, studied, examined like a virus that might someday evolve into something less deadly. Brooks called it the leash. Raiden disagreed. It's not a leash, he said in a closed war room session. It's a mirror, and if we don't like what we see in it, that's on us. The Kestrel Dawn was reassigned. Not to war, not to exploration, but to repair. They became a roaming vessel of contact and aid, patrolling fringe systems, helping colonies meet new ethical standards, preventing violations, and re-establishing relationships that the old expansion had shattered. Raiden called it penance. Some left the crew, not in fear, but in rejection of the idea that humanity could be saved, that it should be. Others stayed, and new ones joined, idealists, scientists, reformers. Even a few former insurgents, now sworn to fix what they once fought to break. Their first mission took them to a poison moon colony. A corporate mining operation had abandoned it, leaving behind sick workers and contaminated soil. No aid had been sent. The crew of the Kestrel Dawn brought food, medicine, filtration systems. When a child, no older than 10, tugged on Raiden's coat and asked, "Are you the captain who stopped the monsters?" He knelt beside her and answered softly, "No. But I'm trying to make sure we don't become them again." The child's words stayed with Raiden longer than he expected, not because of the awe in her voice, but because of the quiet assumption behind it that someone could stop monsters, that there were monsters, that maybe, sometimes, they were us. After the moon colony, the missions came faster. Word spread in unofficial channels of a ship that didn't come to conquer, but to listen. The Kestrel Dawn became a whisper in the void, spoken about in hushed tones. A myth for some, a warning for others. Some called them the Watchers, others, the Shamed. But more and more, people began calling them something simpler, the ones who stayed. Not to fight, but to change. It wasn't easy. On one fringe world, they intervened when local governors tried to displace native life forms for atmospheric conversion. The governor argued economics. Jin showed him the updated directives from Earth Command, the newly ratified postponement protocol, built directly from the Kestrel Dawn incident. It wasn't perfect. It was barely more than a gesture. But it meant Earth was watching now too. And that mattered. One operation took them to the edge of Giza 590b, a gas giant where storms made comms nearly impossible. A former research facility there had been abandoned years prior, but new signals suggested someone was back, illegally. When Raiden deployed a recon team, what they found sickened even the hardened crew. Bioweapon tests, stasis pods, experimentation on non-human life. One pod contained a life form native to the Kori moons, listed extinct since 2179. It was alive. Barely. Raiden stared through the frost-ringed glass at a being so delicate it seemed carved from crystal and breath, and they had caged it. He gave the order with no hesitation. Shut it all down. Detain the researchers. Burn the rest. Brooks stood beside him as they oversaw the evacuation. You're going to make enemies in high places, he said quietly. Raiden nodded. Then maybe we're finally doing something right. They brought the survivors aboard, built containment and habitat units from spare medbay modules. The ship diverted course toward the Kori remnants, where the being's DNA might still resonate with native conditions. If not, then at least it wouldn't die in a cage. No one gave speeches. There was no triumph. Only quiet, determined motion. That night, Raiden sat in the observation deck with the old recorder in his hands. The one he'd used before Judgment had been delivered. He clicked it on. I don't know if you're still watching, he said. But if you are, I hope you see this. He paused. I know we can't erase what we did, but we can balance it. We can try. We can show that we learn, that we change. He exhaled slowly. I don't need you to approve. I just need you not to give up on us yet. He clicked it off. Outside, something shimmered, barely perceptible, like a ripple in the fabric of the stars. Nothing concrete, nothing certain, but Raiden saw it. And for the first time, he smiled. The Kestrel Dawn kept moving. More missions. More stops. In time, other ships followed. Some from fringe governments. Others independent traders who shifted their practices, refusing to take contracts that involved displacement or exploitation. A freighter in the Mirai Belt rerouted an entire supply chain to avoid damaging a fragile aquatic ecosystem. A patrol ship near the frontier reach chose to protect a minor alien settlement instead of logging it for removal. Each act was a brushstroke and a new painting, a new identity for a species that had once been defined by conquest. The transformation wasn't universal. Some still resisted. One rogue vessel fired on an alien diplomatic envoy. It vanished 2 days later. No trace. No signal. The stars, it seemed, were still listening. Raiden didn't fear them anymore. He respected them. And that made all the difference. The Kestrel Dawn returned to the Giza system after months away. The researchers they'd arrested were now standing trial. The life form they'd rescued was, if not thriving, at least stable. Its heartbeat had aligned with the rhythms of the moon's electromagnetic field, a sign that it remembered home, even if it couldn't name it. Raiden visited the containment bay alone. He didn't speak. He just sat and listened. And for a moment, in the low hum of the ship, in the blinking lights of vitals stabilizing, in the silence that had once meant judgment, he felt something else. A kind of peace. Peace in the void was never meant to last. It was a fragile thing earned, not given. And Raiden Holt understood that more than most. The shimmer he had seen in the stars never returned. No new messages came. No voices. No verdicts. Just silence. But silence, now, was layered. It wasn't the suffocating hush of dread anymore. It was patience. Like the stars had spoken once, and now waited to see if humanity remembered their words. The Kestrel Dawn continued its mission. Across forgotten moons and scorched colonies, they left traces not of dominance, but of care. Water reclamation systems installed in ghost towns. Displaced life forms relocated. Resource exploitation projects halted or rewritten entirely. They weren't rewriting history. They were walking it back. Word spread, not officially, not from Earth Command. They still played politics. Still debated whether the postponement protocol was real or just a myth born from deep space hysteria. But in the dark, out where starlight bends around black holes, captains talked. They told each other to watch for the voice, the shimmer, the judgment. And more than that, they began watching themselves. Raiden saw it in the logs, in the route corrections, in the sudden, unprompted de-escalations from patrol fleets that once would have pulled the trigger first. It wasn't universal. It wasn't perfect, but it was happening. One day, Jin approached him on the bridge. Got something, she said, her voice tight. Just outside the Ophiuchus expanse. A structure. He looked at the data. Different from the sphere, but familiar in feeling. A tower. Floating vertically in the dark, rotating with impossible symmetry. No emissions. No defense systems. Just presence. Judgment. Brooks asked. Raiden shook his head slowly. No, not this time. They approached, cautiously. The tower didn't react. No signals. No shutdowns. When they got close enough to scan its surface, they found something carved into the alloy. Not words. Not language. Images. One of Earth. One of a Martian dome city. One of the Kestrel Dawn. Then, nothing. No message. Jin asked. Raiden looked at the display for a long time. Then he said, that is the message. Recognition, Brooks whispered. They remember, Raiden said quietly. And for now, they're letting us continue. They left the tower in silence. They didn't broadcast it, didn't log it in official reports. It wasn't meant for governments. It was meant for them. A few days later, they received a call from a deep-range cargo hauler that had encountered a collapsed colony, the result of a mining accident that had left a valley poisoned. No survivors. No justice. Raiden deployed the crew anyway. Not to save, but to record. To clean. To bear witness. In the ruins of the colony, they found a message etched into a collapsed wall. Please tell someone we tried. Raiden sat with those words longer than he'd sat with any broadcast, any alien signal. Because it wasn't written for judgment. It was written in hope. And maybe that was all judgment had ever been about. Hope. The Kestrel Dawn kept moving. They weren't alone anymore. Other ships had joined. Others had changed. Some called themselves the Restoration Fleet. Others refused to take any name at all. They just acted. They left aid on abandoned worlds, carried diplomacy to species long ignored, tracked down war criminals and held them accountable, even when Earth refused to. The stars had spoken once. That was enough. Raiden Holt, once a captain, now simply a man with a voice, never sent another message to the monument. But he kept the recorder. He held it sometimes when the crew slept, when the engines purred, when the stars whispered nothing but the truth of the void. And on the anniversary of the day they'd stood in judgment, he climbed back into the observation deck. He clicked the recorder on. "I still don't know if you're listening," he said. "But I know you're out there." He paused. "We're still trying." Outside, a single star pulsed, just once, then faded. No sound, no voice. But for Raiden, it was enough. Because some judgments aren't spoken. Some are earned, every day. And humanity, at last, had stopped running. Now it walked, carefully, deliberately, eyes open. One world at a time. One mistake at a time. One second chance at a time. And in the dark, the ones who watched remembered. They always remembered. And they were waiting to see if, this time, we wouldn't let it fall apart.